Hi, in this short tutorial I want to show you how to use FormMaker with FormMaker Assistant to create interactive PDF forms in InDesign. First, let's just make a basic form. I'm going to select the text tool and drag out a little text frame, and we'll create a few labels. Let's make a form that the user can use to order some fruit and vegetables. So the first label will be apples. And let's give that a bit of formatting, so make it right aligned and give the text a color, make it a red, and let's choose a font for this text. I'll use this one, and let's center align vertically the text. So that's our basic label, apples, and perhaps it's a good idea to create a paragraph style for that. So I'll call it label, and now let's just duplicate this a few times so that we have 3 labels. I'll call it apples, oranges, and lemons. Next, I'm going to do the same thing, but I want to put in a price, and this price I actually want it to be a field so that the form, the interactive form, can read the price and calculate things accordingly. So for the apples, I'm going to say that the price is 10, and I'm going to center this for the price, and I don't think the text frame needs to be so big, like that. Now let's make another paragraph style for that. So I'm going to call this price, and perhaps delete these two, and then duplicate this a few times. Like that, and give the oranges a different price and the lemons a different price. Lemons will be cheaper because they're, sour. Okay, so now let's make these prices a form field, turn them into a form field, and to do that we have to open InDesign's Buttons and Forms panel. I have a custom workspace because I use this a lot, so it's over here. If you don't have that, you should be able to find it in Window, Interactive, and Buttons and Forms. So I've selected all 3, and I'm going to select them, turn them into text fields, and I'm going to make these text fields read only. I don't want the user to be able to change the price, so I'll check that button. Next, let's create 3 form fields where the user can actually type in the quantity that he wants to order. So I could just duplicate these 3 like that and drag them out over here. Now in this case I do want them to be editable, so I'm going to disable read only, and I don't want there to be any default text in this in these fields, unlike the price, where I do want the price to be showing, so I'll just leave them blank. Now in this case I think I want to have some sort of an outline for these fields so that the user can actually know that he's supposed to type things in. So let's just give it a small stroke, a 1-point black stroke, so the user knows that you can type that in. And it's always a good idea to create an object style for this sort of thing. So I'm going to make this user input. It will be a new object style, and I'll apply it to this text frame and to this text frame. That way, if I want to change something, I can do so easily. The next thing I want to do is create a subtotal column. So once again, I'm going to copy these frames and drag them out here. And this will be the subtotal. And let's perhaps just make that a bit wider. And again, we don't want any default text here because this will be calculated by the form. On the other hand, we do want it to be read-only, and it is read-only, so that's fine. Now, just to make things clearer, it might be a good idea to create labels for these columns. So I'll put over here another text frame, and I'll call it price. Well, I'll call it dollars per kilo, and let's use the same paragraph style as the price, and we can align that to the bottom. This column we said is the quantity column. where the user can actually select the quantity that he wants. So just it's not going to fit, so we'll type quantity like that. And finally, this column is the subtotal column. So I'll drag that out, and I'll just type subtotal. Okay. Now, I think it's a good idea just to have a little line underneath everything here so that everything's added up. And then we want a total. So let's create a label for the total of the order. Just type total. And let's copy a field here, and this will be where the total actually displays. At this point, let's have a look at what this form will look like in Acrobat. Note that we haven't used FormMaker yet, and we've not used FormMaker Assistant. We've just used InDesign's basic functions, and this is pretty much as far as you're going to get with InDesign. So let's export this. File, Export, and I'll just call it Sample, and I'll replace it, and export the form, and it will open in Acrobat. And this is what we've got to begin with. This is what we've got from InDesign. I can type the quantity here, but you'll note that the text font is wrong and it's left aligned. You'll also see that the price isn't showing up for the oranges and lemons. Actually, what's strange is that at some stage I deleted this label. That's a technical. The apples disappeared. Go back to the form in Acrobat. We'll fix that, so we fixed that. And obviously the subtotal is a read-only field. I can't type anything here, and it's not showing a subtotal, and the total is not showing up. And so there's a lot of work that would normally need to be done in Acrobat to fix up this form and to finalize it and to make it interactive. And that's what we're going to do in InDesign, because two things. Who wants to do a form in Acrobat? It's a fiddly business. It's not convenient. It's not made for page layout. And number two, if there's ever going to be any edits to this form, those edits will have to be redone in InDesign, and then you're going to have to do all of this work again in Acrobat. And so that's why FormMaker makes it so much easier to create interactive PDFs, because everything is done in InDesign, and you don't have to do this crazy dance where you're checking it in Acrobat, adding the interactivity in Acrobat, and then going back to InDesign, making edits, and then redoing all of that work in Acrobat. So let's see how we do this. So I'll go back to InDesign. And let's start adding the interactivity. Now, obviously, for the subtotal, we want to multiply the price per kilo by the quantity that the user types in. And so we have to make a note of the names of these fields. So let's open the buttons and forms. And we see that this is called text field 1, and this is text field 4. This is 2, and this is 5, and this is 3, and this is 6, so that's fine. So subtotal needs to be 1 times 4, field 1 times field 4. Let's run FormMaker Assistant to help us. Open InDesign's Scripts panel, and if you don't have that in your custom workspace, you'll find it in Window, Utilities, Scripts, and double-click on FormMaker Assistant to launch it. Now, what we want to do is make the subtotal. We want to calculate it. It should be a calculation. It should be the product of text field 1 times text field 4. So we mark those options and we click on Insert Script, and it tells us that the script has been successfully added to the form field. And what that actually means is that in InDesign, every page item has a script label. Now, if you don't script InDesign, you're not probably familiar with that. There is actually a panel in InDesign called the Scripts Label panel. Again, I've got this on my custom workspace. And what's just happened is that this Acrobat JavaScript, which FormMaker Assistant created on the fly based on our options, has now been inserted into the script label of this item on the page. So if I select a different item, you'll see the script label is black. But if I select this, it's got all the script, and that script is actually going to calculate the product of text field 1 and text field 4. And that's what we want. Now let's do the same for the other two fields. And in this case, we want still the product, but we want text field 2 times text field 5. And I'm going to insert the script See what happens in the script label panel. It suddenly appears, and we'll do the same here. This is 3 times 6, so clear all, select text field 3 and text field 6, and insert the script, and that's done. Next, we want to have the total calculate the sum of these 3 form fields, and again, they are text field 7, 8, and 9. So 7, 8, and 9. The total here should be the sum. Let's clear all and select field 7, 8, and 9, and we want it to be the sum. And all of this should be familiar to you because it's very similar to the properties panel in Acrobat. And I'll click on Insert Script. It tells me that it's been successfully added, and so that should all be working now. Let's test it in Acrobat. I'll close FormMaker Assistant. Now, before we can test it in Acrobat, there's a crucial step, and that is to run FormMaker. FormMaker Assistant does not run FormMaker, it just adds the scripts to the fields. So we double-click on FormMaker in the scripts panel, and that's all that happens. It says that the data has been successfully stored. That's all we need to do. And at this stage, the form is ready to export to interactive PDF. Let's do that again. File, Export, and we'll call it, we'll overwrite this. Now I should just close the form in Acrobat, otherwise we'll get an error. Do you want to replace it? Yes, and export. And this is the form in Acrobat. Now at this stage, it's still the basic form that exports from InDesign. What we need to do is go to the Edit menu, select FormMaker, click on that, and FormMaker reinstates all of the information that we had in InDesign, including the calculation scripts and the formatting. So you see that now we have the default text that was in these fields, which is the price, and the quantity. If I type a quantity, it's using the correct font. And by the way, even if the user does not have this font installed in their computer, it's going to show up in the correct font, which is not the case with InDesign. The latest version, CC 2019 of InDesign, also allows you to select a font for form field. However, the user will not see that font unless they happen to have it installed in their computer. Not so with FormMaker. Even if they don't have the font installed in their computer, they'll still be able to see the font when they run the form and they open it in Acrobat Reader. So I've typed in the quantity here, 3, and if I tab out of this field, we see that the subtotal is correct. It's 30, 3 times 10, and 2, so that's 24, should be 54, and 7, let's choose 5 kilo. So you've got 35, and everything seems to be working okay in this case. So that's great. That is the basics of how you use FormMaker Assistant and FormMaker to create an interactive PDF form, all completely in InDesign. By the way, this particular form could even be done with the free version of FormMaker because it's a single page form. There are fewer than 10 form fields, so I believe it can be done even with the free version. Now, I want to show you 1 or 2 more things that you can do with FormMaker Assistant just to improve the formatting. Well, for instance, the quantity, maybe it should have a single decimal place after it. It should be 3.0 because I could type 3.2. Also, I do want to limit these fields to accept only numbers. Right now, you can type anything, and that's not ideal. So we can use FormMaker Assistant to fix those things. Let's go back to InDesign. So in the quantity, let's run FormMaker Assistant again. Double click on it. And in this case, the first thing I want to do is change the format of this field. So I'll click on the Format tab here. I'll select number because I want it to be a number. I want to have a single decimal place show up all the time. And also, as it's a number, it will prevent any other key presses appearing in the form field. So this looks good. 1 decimal place, separate cell. Quantity doesn't need a currency, so no currency symbol. Symbol location therefore isn't relevant, and you can't choose a negative quantity. So these are the options that we want, and once again I'll click on Insert Script, and that's done for this. And seeing as this field is the same, I can just use the same options here and here 3 times, and that's done. Now let's do the subtotal. Well, the subtotal is going to be a dollar sum, so I do want to choose a currency symbol. I'll choose dollars. And I think I want 2 decimal places. Makes more sense for a sum, a price. Once again, I don't need the red text and so on. So these options seem correct. And I'll insert the script here and here and here. That's great, and in fact the total is exactly the same. It should also be a $sign and 2 decimal places, so I can insert it here. Finally, let's say that I've only got 10 kilos of each available per customer, so I want to limit the quantity to be between 0 and 10 for each of these fields. So I'll go over to the Validate tab, and I'll type in a range from 0 to 10. And you see that the script here appears straight away. Select this form field and click on Insert Script once, and again, and the third time. So what we've done is we've set the format of these fields, we've set the range of the fields, and let's see what that looks like in Acrobat. So let's close FormMaker Assistant and export this to interactive PDF. Of course, you mustn't forget to first run FormMaker because we made some changes to the form. So I just double-clicked on that, clicked OK, and export to interactive PDF, overwrite the previous form, and in Acrobat, run FormMaker. And now let's see what happens if I type in a quantity, say, of 2. So we see that it's added a single decimal place because that's the way we formatted this field. You've got the subtotal with a currency symbol and 2 decimal places and the total also. So that all seems to work very well, and it's only a small number of things that you can do here. Now, one last thing I want to show is how to use FormMaker Assistant to add PDF document scripts to the form. Document scripts are very useful. They're run as soon as the PDF is opened in Acrobat Reader, and they can be used mainly to store variables and functions that are repeatedly used so as to keep the file size down. That's perhaps not so exciting, but it's very useful. But in a more cool way, you can actually use them to do things which you couldn't do otherwise. For instance, I don't really like this blue highlighting. I'm not a big fan of it, and I want to get rid of it. I want, when the user opens his PDF, his or her PDF form in Acrobat Reader, I want there to be no highlighting. The only way to do that is to turn off the highlighting, which is an Acrobat option. And you can do that with a document script. So let's see how it's done. I'll close this form and go back to InDesign. And I'll run FormMaker Assistant, and under the Document JavaScripts tab, I'm going to add a new document JavaScript. I'm going to call it No Field Highlighting, although the name isn't so important. And I'll click on Add, and I'll paste a little one-line script which I copied from elsewhere. It's just app.runtime highlight equals false. That's the script that turns off highlighting, and that will be run as soon as the document is open in Acrobat. So that's been added now, that script, and I will run FormMaker on this form again to store that information. Let's export this form and see what happens in Acrobat. Overwrite the sample, export it, it opens up in Acrobat, go to Edit, run FormMaker, and you see, bang, the highlight has been removed, and all this has done is actually switched off the user's highlighting preference in Acrobat. Some users may not be so happy that your PDF form is changing their application preferences. You have to weigh that up and decide if the design is more important or respecting the user's settings more important. That's something for you to decide. But in any case, it's a very cool way of seeing, of using document JavaScripts. Let's have a quick peek at what FormMaker has actually done to this form to make all of this possible. If we edit the form and examine the fields, for instance the quantity field, this opens Acrobat's text field properties, and we'll see that under the format we've got custom formatting scripts which modify the keystroke to prevent non-numbers being entered. Under the validation, we've set it from 0 to 10, it's added a custom script, and there's nothing in the calculation for this one. In other fields, though, there is. The total field has a custom calculation script. So it's actually using Acrobat's custom scripts for everything. And of course, the document script, if we show JavaScripts in Acrobat, document JavaScripts, here's a little one line script that we inserted. So that's how FormMaker works. I think that you'll find that if you're using making a lot of PDF forms, interactive PDF forms, you will quickly not know how you managed without it. It's a great application, great add-on for InDesign for anybody working in PDF form. So that concludes this short tutorial. I hope you found it interesting and useful. If you have any questions, please do get in touch. You'll find the scripts available on idextras.com. You can download the free version from there or the subscription version. I'd love to hear from you with questions, comments, and please like this video if you enjoyed it. Thanks very much for watching.